grabbing pieces and constructing the story. Then they're looking at your face and seeing if it's working. And we're given all kinds of micro messages, intentionally or not, that it may or not. And if we give it, it's not working, they go back up and grab another piece. Or even if it looks like it's working, they're grabbing something that else feels familiar. And their story starts changing. They're trying to tell a story that they don't know, that they don't experience sequentially. So a lot of folks have shifted from, if you know the truth, if you know what's going on, you just tell them, this is what I noticed, what are we going to do about it? Or we ask simple questions like, what's the big thing, how are we going to fix it? Because kids can usually remember the big thing. They can't remember the story. Our posterior cingulate also goes offline. This is the part of our brain that's responsible for knowing where our body is in space. Think back into the past couple of years, maybe even earlier today. When we get super stressed, we don't know where our body is in space, and you may have used words like, I just can't seem to get my feet underneath me. I feel disoriented. I get lost easily. That is the posterior cingulate. We lose touch with where our body is in space. And if we don't know where our body is in space, our brain can't attend to a lot of other things. So it would be analogous to if you're a seeing person, me blindfolding you and asking you to walk across the room. You're likely to do things like touch things along your way. I want you to think about the number of kids you've seen in your career that slide down hallways, down the walls, that sprawl across surfaces, that any chance they're given to lie on the floor, they will. That are always leaning into other people. These may be behaviors where they are trying to ground themselves, not consciously, but their body is seeking to know where it is in space. They're touching everybody on the way to somewhere else. Just like you might do if you lost your sight, so you knew where your body was in space. The answer to this are things like grounding activities. Shoot, time's going fast. I've got to talk faster and less examples, but grounding opportunities, taking moments to just feel yourself in your seat, and giving kids times where they can lean up against something, they can be on the floor at work. We can talk about a whole bunch of stuff. The other thing is, if you have a child with childhood trauma, you have lower levels of vasopressin and oxytocin in your system. And these are the things that allow you to develop calming pathways. You don't have an efficient way, and maybe not an age-appropriate way, to self-calm. And so we want to teach kids how to self-calm. We want to give them options on how to self-calm. And many of the options that we've been told over the years that are effective are a little effective, but there are more effective ways, and those are big conversations that when we have to talk about practice, we can talk about. The neurological system of a child with childhood trauma has been built in chaos because as it's growing, it's dysregulated. And a chaotic development means a chaotic system that's trying to then move in the world, which means they need lots of supports. It might take longer to do things. They need more scaffolding in order to be able to do things. We see things like fine motor issues as a result of this. So if you have students that have food on their face and they don't seem to know it, or if you've noticed that their fine motor skills, they can't get right to the right page, they can't do fine motor skills, some of that may be related to a system that is not fully tuned up because it was being organized chaotically. I think it's really analogous with older people whose systems are starting to tune down. So if you have someone much older in your life who starts fumbling with buttons or turning pages, that is the system tuning down, and they may have food on their face or in their teeth. Those fine neurons are being whittled away, and they're not sensing the world the same way. Well, kids with trauma histories, theirs hasn't tuned all the way up. So they might touch people harder, they might not be able to do fine motor skills, they might not recognize things. We might think they're not paying attention or they don't care. But when we interpret it through this lens, we'll see that it's actually rooted in neurology. We also see that they're dysregulated. And if I have a crop of a water bottle and a soda bottle, shaking that up, dysregulation means when I'm shaken up, I can't settle back down very easily. It's why a lot of us have been punished out of using some active engagement strategies, because we use them. We give kids a brain break, and the kids that we think need the brain break the most either refuse to engage in them. And I think at some level they're aware that if they start, they'll never be able to stop. And then there are kids that do start and they don't stop, and we're peeling them off the ceilings. It's because that brain break may be burning off some of the stress chemicals, the adrenaline particularly, which is settling for the system, but it's not addressing the regulation needs. So when we do things, I keep on hearing the word about drumming. When we do things about drumming, like drumming, anything with pattern and repetition is actually calming. So if we do brain breaks that are less random and more repetitive and ritualistic, the better off we're going to be. We're going to have more kids that will be able to engage them, and come back from them as well. And of course, we know kids can end up in fight, flight, or freeze. And so many times we might think what we're doing is right. I had somebody say, well, he really responds when I just say, stop. But we had to ask, is he really responding, or is he moving to freeze, which is a doubly difficult state. So, psyche. I'm going to do this super fast in 3 minutes. We're going to do each of them. How we see the world. When we think about any relational stuff with kids with trauma histories, we do relationship the way we do with other kids, but we have to do it with more intention and more resiliency ourselves. And we also need to just be incredibly persistent. And we want to think little things, little things, little things, little things, because that's how we begin to build trust. Because kids with trauma histories often don't trust adults. They don't see them as having been able to provide the things that they needed in life. And so they may have been people who were the source of their pain. So they look at adults with a skeptical eye. It means we have to endure past a lot of rejection. We have to endure, and we have to be persistent in our little connections with that child. And we can, as we do that, we're going to have to also endure through, we thought we made it with the kid, and then they blew it up. And we have to be ready to come back after that. And we also have to recognize that we have to think about how they trust their peers. Because if I didn't feel safe emotionally or physically, I view the world through the eye of scarcity. I believe there's not enough good stuff in the world for me. And if there's not enough stuff in the world for me, what are my peers? They're my competition. It's a win-lose. That's my view of the world. So while we're working so hard at developing relationships with our students, we also have to really focus on helping them to develop relationships with each other. Because if we don't, they're likely to be kids with transactional relationships. I give you this, you give me that. And this has caused a lot of places to really look at their systems, their behavior systems, their reinforcement systems, all those sorts of things. Are they kind of supporting this concept of transactionality between us as human beings? We also have to recognize that as we build our wonderful relationships with kids, they may become more competitive with their peers, because I call it the life preserver effect. The more, if I've been a kid who's been drowning and not be able to trust the world, and I finally decide to trust you, I swim up and I have that glorious moment of feeling like I can breathe and I'm going to be okay because I trusted you. The very next thing that happens is somebody else swims up, wanting your attention, or 30 other, or 40 other, people keep on coming up, and that child is likely, metaphorically or physically, to kick the other student away. So if we don't work simultaneously on our relationships among kids, as well as with us, we're likely to have this life preserver effect. And the final one is really trust in self. The job of childhood is to identify, kind of really decide, who am I? The self-sensing parts of the brain are compromised by trauma. I don't know who I am. The experiences of being highly dysregulated causes me to not know who I am. And so I might one moment be the boss of me and want to control everything, and the next moment I'm a puddle and can't make a move. So when we think about one of the most important things we can do for a child to help establish a sense of them is to kind of declare it for them before we even see it. So it's that believe before seeing kind of thing that we want to do and articulating that to kids. What I can trust. If I don't trust adults, I don't trust my peers, and I don't even trust myself, is chaos. Because chaos is predictable. It's easier for me to say, you know, I'm going to sabotage this academic activity because then I don't have to guess whether I'm going to be successful or not. I'm going to sabotage this relationship because I don't have to worry if they're going to like me or not. And so one of our jobs, I had a grandmother said, I was working with her very young 5-year-old grandson, and she said he's very, very good at being very, very bad. And I said our job is going to be to help to teach him that he can be very good at being good. And we're going to figure that out together. And that'll be the new kiddo that he is. But helping kids move from chaos that's predictable to success that's predictable is not an easy journey. Okay, so I need to let you go because it's past time. But that's sort of the beginning of the conversation and the science that we'll keep on threading back to as we affirm what you do and as we move forward into making some new practices.
Thank you, everyone. There will be way more to come.